Hi there. While I'm waiting for my parts to arrive, I thought I might as well keep wiring. So we're going to do this aviation connector. This is the last one of 4, so I thought I'd film it. And it's not going to be a normal installation, mainly because I have a couple challenges. First is, this cable is too big for this connector. This is probably 7 mil. That's, I don't know, 10, 12, easy. So we're going to have to find a clever solution for that. Second is that the markings on these cables. So you got 3 black cables here and 1 yellow green. Now these are marked, but they're only marked like every 6 inches or so. So I really kind of have to go back quite a ways. And like I mentioned, this is the wrong size. So let me just show you what I came up with to fix all those problems. So firstly, you need to get these apart to even start working on them. And they all seem to have this one tiny screw, usually down by the base. And that will usually allow you to pull this out so that you can solder on your wires. So we're going to go ahead and take this apart completely. So, challenge 1, like I said, this cable does not fit in here. Normally, it seems you would have the proper size cable, spin it all the way through, do whatever you need to do up here, and then push it back. We don't have that luxury. So, one thing I will say, when you're working with a cable that has this weaved shield around it, you're going to be dealing with lots of little tiny bits of wire, and you really need to clean those up right away, otherwise they're going to embed into your project, or they'll embed into your finger, which has happened a couple times. Trust me. It hurts for a day or so. Okay, one good thing about this cable is it is heavily shielded, so you can really, don't go nuts, but you can get a knife right up to her without worrying too much. There you go. And another good feature of this cable is, along with the shield, it has the silver conductor that runs the entire length. So you don't really need to deal with the shield if you want to ground it. All you have to deal with is that, which is exactly what we're going to do. And you probably can't see it, but this is covered with little tiny slivers of... Okay, I cut my ground. Take 2. That's unfortunate. We don't really have a lot of cable here to deal with. Alright, I'm going to cut myself out of frame here pretty quick. So I think we'll go a little easier on this cut, and hopefully we get lucky with the markings on the wire. Actually, I'll probably just fast forward through all of this. That should be it for the evil wire. Alright, so before we go any further, we want to get this black heat shrink on this cable, because eventually when we're all done, we're going to swing this down and pretty much cover this first notch here, if you can imagine that, when we're all done. So the foil, I try to keep some of the foil, or as much as I can, mainly because I want that to be part of the solution that this clamp is going to be clamping onto. Alright, so now we need to go find our wires, or our markings, I should say. Let's see if we get lucky here. Okay, this is a 2, where it's marked 2. So I've been putting 2 dashes on the outside, just so I can find it later. And these markings actually have to be on the bottom when we get going. So if I can name one more, then I know what the other one is. There it is right there. Alright. This is number 3. You probably can't see that. And then, this is obviously 1. It's the only one left. Should be 2 marks on that one. There it is. Okay. Alright, so we found our conductors pretty quick. That's good. Okay, I'm not sure when the camera stopped. I wasn't looking. But basically we need to cut these down to length so that I can at least get some of this copper in here. And it turns out on this one, you just kind of shoot right down through that hole and that'll tell you where to cut it. So that's basically where it's going to be. So cutting it on the side of the hole will give you, an 1/8 inch to spare. So first thing I got to do is move these marks down because we're going to cut the top. Alright, so basically you get it down. Again, this is only for, in my particular case here, because I have the wrong cable. But I really want this foil to be on this clamp. So that puts us about there. So that's what we're going to call it. One, 2, and 3. Okay. So the next part of this process for my incorrect size cable is we're going to take some of this white heat shrink and we're just going to get a rough idea how much we need. I've been sending it over a little, not all the way. So that's about there. It's been a few days since I did the other 3, so I'm kind of remembering what it was I had to do. So this actually gets heat shrinked on because we need to get this connector over it. Alright, so now we're going to let that cool off. I just realized I had the humidifier on during the first part of that video. So that's the humming you were hearing. But I'm not cutting this wire and doing it over again. Obviously very important to put that on before you go soldering. Now here's the really important bit. You want to take a piece of heat shrink that's just about that size so that it covers these conductors. Pretty sure it does not go over. Yeah, you can see. Alright, and then you want to leave a little extra. But the problem is you can't use too much because you really got to get this stuff out of the way. When you're soldering these wires, it's going to send heat into these wires and it's going to start deforming your heat shrink. So just stuff it in that cap as far as it will go. And hopefully it's not deformed when we need it. And I've been marking these because I really don't want to lose track of which is which. Not the end of the world. You just swap the wires down at the controller and your stepper motor will still work fine. But you don't want one exception out of 4. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and get some copper here. And you can see 2 things. We don't need much because there's not a lot there. And B, you can't get heat shrink tubing under it, which you could with an application like this. You could put the heat shrink on the wire before you solder it. But in this case, you don't have that. Again, all the more reason to cover it over when you're done. Let's get some copper showing. That's right, I said copper. I'm in the Northeast, if you couldn't tell. Okay, so we need to tin these. And you're better off not disturbing. You don't want to twist them and then tin them. If you can get away with it, just leave them just the way they are. They're a lot more structured and uniform, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Tip number 1. You need this cable to be steady. You don't want to be chasing it with a soldering iron. So whatever you got to do, this is all I got. There's only one rule you need to follow when you're tinning. And that is let the wire melt the solder. Don't melt the solder onto the wire. So basically what that means is you want to get some heat on the wire, then come in and you can see, maybe you can't, but the wire, the copper was melting that solder, not the soldering iron. And that way you ensure that you get good penetration. So we've got our heat shrink, we have our connector, and we have the heat shrink inside. So now we're going to go for pin number 1, which is right there. Okay. So the rule here, same thing. You want the metal on this conductor to melt the solder, not the other way around. And I guess the only thing I would say is don't be afraid to get right in there and just glue it right on. The plastic won't melt. They did think of that when they designed them. At least if it's I don't ever recall buying one that melted instantly. And the trick here is you want that wire to naturally be where it needs to be. If you're putting pressure on it, once the solder melts, it's going to go its own way. You don't want that. So usually how I do these is basically left-handed. Never good. But I just like to get it joined with the solder on the conductor. Just like that. We're not done yet. Because technically that's a cold solder. I'm not exactly a cold solder Nazi, but we do need to do better than that. Then I like to do, or intentionally, put a cold solder on there. And then, once everything's ready, just really lay the heat right on it. Just get all that solder mixing as one. That's it. It's not going anywhere. And then rinse and repeat. I'll probably fast forward through this part. I'm not sure why my camera keeps stopping. I'm going to have to look into that. When I started this project, I didn't want to buy a new camera. So I took this camera off of my astrophotography rig, which is it's a Canon Rebel, which is why I'm kind of stuck with these static shots. It does have autofocus when it's filming, but this is what it is. Yeah, see, it's not annoying at all, right? Anyway, we're done. Go ahead and grab our heat shrink that we snuck away. Bring that right up tight. So that's reasonably adequate. And I gotta say, these connectors, they hold heat very good, I must say. Alright. So it's still screaming hot, but I'm going to push it on anyway. That's an example of how not to do it. So I'm going to put the screw back in while we can. Whew, it's still hot. Hot, hot. Alright. Now, the ground. So as you can see, we only have the 4-conductor connector here, so I can't run a ground through this connector. So what I've been doing, what I came up with, was we run this all the way down here. Get these started. Okay, so that accomplishes two things. We get our ground wire attached to this metal body. And without this copper cable in here, this connector was actually too big for the heat shrink alone, even with the foil under it. So that really gives us a nice tight lock. And the grounding is really to protect the signal going to the steppers. With shielding, you only want to ground one side, you don't ground both. So I chose to ground this side. And then once all that's together, send over your black or your larger heat shrink and give her some. And that is hot, like I mentioned. So that's my solution for installing an aviation connector with the wrong size wire. So, there you go.
The thing caves in, it falls on top of some power lines, because obviously it looks like it's aluminized. That's what we keep it sturdy. So it falls on power lines, short out the whole city of London, become a huge mess.
Now you're just daydreaming. Now you're just wishing.
I'm hoping. Yeah. I'm not daydreaming. This is just wishful thinking.
Finally, some progress. So our board's done. As you can see, we're all wired up. Everything's functioning. Pretty happy about that. We have our limit switch cables, our network cable. And we have our e-stop back. Pretty happy about that. That means we only have one thing left to do before we can mount it, and that is to fill in these DB25 holes. And as you can see, I've already started that. I think I finally have the final product. So I'll probably do a quick video on the process of creating, or at least how I created and made those 3D printed covers. So that's a wrap. We're good. I'll catch you next time.